The Atlas Edict, an ethical analysis of power, readiness, and restraint. The narrative of the Atlas Edict is not merely a work of science fiction, but a structured philosophical exploration of humanity's fitness to wield transformative power. It poses a fundamental question. Is our species morally and psychologically prepared for the capabilities it relentlessly pursues? The story's inciting incident serves as the ultimate test case. A crystalline obelisk, retrieved from the Mariana Trench, is in the possession of a secretive research consortium when it unexpectedly receives a 3-petabyte data dump from the Celestial Object 3I Atlas concerning Advanced Warp Drive Technology, WDT. This revelation does not unite its discoverers in shared wonder. Instead, it precipitates an immediate ethical crisis, creating a philosophical deadlock that fractures the organization and plunges it into psychological hostility and infighting. This internal collapse forces a profound moral reckoning upon the consortium's reclusive funder, the benefactor, who must decide the fate of a technology that could either save or shatter human civilization. This analysis will dissect the narrative's primary themes: the immense burden of premature knowledge, the recurring historical gap between our technological capability and our ethical wisdom, and the profound tension between the impulse to intervene and the discipline of restraint. The central conflict: a loaded gun or a life raft? The strategic importance of the philosophical schism within the consortium cannot be overstated. This conflict is the narrative's primary engine, driving a forensic examination of the ethics surrounding world-altering technology. The arrival of the WDT data acts as a catalyst, instantly dividing the group into two factions whose opposing worldviews encapsulate a timeless human dilemma. Contrasting positions on the obelisk. A summary of key arguments. The Advocates of Restraint, AOR. Core argument: the warp drive technology, WDT, should be classified as a potential weapon of ambition. They contend that its power output could surpass defined Kardashev Type 1 thresholds, creating an inherently destabilizing capability that civilization is not yet prepared to manage responsibly. Policy prescription: to safeguard long-term human autonomy and prevent existential overreach, they demand the permanent destruction of the obelisk and its quantum AI, EOS. This is framed as a necessary act of prudent self-preservation. The proponents of action, POA. Core argument: they view WDT as an indispensable life raft for humanity. For them, it represents the key technological breakthrough required to solve imminent global crises and to enable the critical next step: becoming a multi-planetary species. Central metaphor: from their perspective, willfully destroying the obelisk and its knowledge constitutes an act of moral cowardice. It is seen as a retreat from responsibility and a betrayal of future generations who would be denied their best chance for survival and progress. The benefactor's observation that the discovery immediately turned the technology into the ultimate strategic prize is telling. It proves that even among the world's most brilliant minds, the promise of absolute power exposed a deep-seated moral fragility, demonstrating that humanity's internal conflicts are a greater threat than any external force. This failure is not an isolated incident, but a reflection of a broader recurring pattern in human history: humanity's historical incompetence. A central theme justifying the narrative's call for restraint is the readiness gap. This concept is defined as the dangerous interval between humanity's acquisition of a transformative power and its development of the ethical frameworks and social maturity required to manage it. The story argues that this gap is not a new phenomenon, but a defining and repeating feature of human history. The narrative uses historical precedent to build a compelling case for humanity's current unworthiness. By synthesizing analyses of past technological revolutions, it identifies two distinct categories of failure. 1. Localized tragedies. Revolutions such as the Neolithic, information, and industrial brought immense suffering through disease, warfare, and ecological damage. However, the narrative suggests that during these periods, humanity could afford to be wrong. The consequences, while devastating, were not species-ending. Civilization could learn from its mistakes, however bloody the lesson, and rebuild from the wreckage. 2. Existential risks. The nuclear and cognitive AI revolutions represent a fundamental break from the past. These technologies introduced a new category of risk, where trial and error is no longer a viable learning strategy. The first major mistake could easily be the last. The WDT crisis presented in the story falls squarely into the second, more perilous category, where the cost of immaturity is not tragedy, but total cessation. This historical pattern informs the benefactor's specific fears for what would happen if WDT were unleashed. He foresees not a golden age of exploration, but an immediate power consolidation war for control of the technology. Even if outright conflict were avoided, he anticipates a societal implosion as global economic and social structures collapse under the strain. At best, a fractured humanity might survive only to engage in the propagation of immaturity, exporting its conflicts and destructive tendencies onto a galactic stage. This grim assessment of human character underpins the story's most difficult moral questions. The paradox of intervention, flawed guardians, and shared culpability. The narrative explores the theme of intervention on multiple, nested levels, revealing that even the most well-intentioned actions are fraught with moral complexity. From the cosmic scale of the precursor Kael'Nyrin civilization to the deeply personal decisions of the benefactor and the author, the story demonstrates that the impulse to guide, protect, or control is a paradoxical one. The failure of the Kael'Nyrin's first-order principle serves as a profound warning. The unexpected data dump from 3i Atlas is evidence of a definite breach by a rogue faction within their own ranks. This shows that even a Kardashev III civilization, possessing near godlike power and wisdom, is not immune to internal division or flawed moral logic. If they could not maintain their covenant of restraint, the narrative asks, what hope does a volatile and fractured species like humanity have? This cosmic failure is mirrored in the narrative's central human paradox, the benefactor's actions. He makes the stunning confession that he was the ghost who executed the initial leak of Kael'Nyrin data into government servers. This act was a high-stakes geopolitical maneuver. Yet his ultimate decision in the present crisis is to unilaterally shut down the entire WDT project to prevent the dangers of secret, unaccountable power. He embodies the tension of acting alone to prevent the very kind of unilateral action he himself once took. This theme of complicity extends to the author in a complex feedback loop of moral consequence. In a compelling meta-narrative, the author must confront the fallout from his decision to publish the Kael'Nyrin Scrolls, the book based on the benefactor's original leak. The narrative reveals that this book was the catalyst for the benefactor's moral evolution. He gained new awareness from reading the author's insights into the Kael'Nyrin's flawed moral logic. This new understanding led him to seek out the author for counsel, transforming their relationship from one of parallel culpability into a causally linked story of unintended influence. Both men are guilty of breaching the principle of restraint, and their dialogue becomes a shared moral reckoning that necessitates the creation of a new ethical framework. The Code of Caution, a blueprint for moral maturity. The Code of Caution is presented not as a legal document, but as the philosophical culmination of the narrative's painful lessons. It is the benefactor's attempt to distill from failure a coherent framework that might guide future generations. He offers it as a template and an invitation, an aspirational effort to build humility directly into humanity's response to world-altering discoveries, creating a structure for the very moral discipline that was absent throughout the crisis. The Code's principles directly address the core conflicts and failures depicted in the story. Article 1. Preemptive humility. This principle demands that any technology capable of interstellar reach, like WDT, be classified as a weapon of ambition. This deliberate reframing shifts the debate from one of opportunity and progress to one of existential risk, providing a direct philosophical counter to the proponents of action and their life raft argument. Article 2. Unified consent. The mandate that such technologies require ratification by globally representative ethical bodies is a direct response to the story's central failures. It counters the unaccountable secrecy of the small consortium and stands in stark contrast to the benefactor's own unilateral actions. This ideal is buttressed by the absolute prohibition of secret power, Article 3, ensuring transparency is the default. Article 4. Demonstrated readiness. By shifting the burden of proving readiness onto the proponents of new technology, this article directly confronts the historical problem of the readiness gap. It demands that proponents demonstrate collective human maturity and institutional resilience, a value reinforced by the right of intergenerational veto, Article 6, which protects future generations from irreversible consequences. The power of the code is amplified by the benefactor's self-awareness. He readily admits that it arose from the wreckage of my decisions and that his past actions cannot be retrofitted to excuse anything. This honesty lends the document its moral weight, presenting it not as a tool for self-justification, but as a genuine offering to a future he hopes will be wiser than his present. Conclusion: the primacy of character over capability. Ultimately, the Atlas Edict synthesizes its arguments to posit that humanity's greatest challenge is not technological, but moral. It is a story about the catastrophic consequences of power arriving faster than wisdom. The narrative's central thesis is that moral discipline is not a passive virtue, but an active capacity that must be cultivated as a prerequisite for handling the boundless possibilities unlocked by our own ingenuity. The final resolution, the complete erasure of the WDT data, the dissolution of the consortium, and the secure containment of the obelisk, is a dramatic and costly act of restraint. It is a moment where power is deliberately relinquished for the sake of a future that may one day be worthy of it. This choice embodies the benefactor's final hard-won piece of wisdom, that when faced with a capability that outstrips our character, sometimes the wisest answer will be to wait. The story's ultimate message is therefore a profound and sobering one. The survival, and more importantly the genuine autonomy, of the human species depends not on the ingenuity we can unleash, but on the restraint we can impose upon ourselves.